Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about chatbots and progressive web apps and how it's a winning combination. What's the hype about with chatbots and how can OutSystems help you implement chatbots in a highly engaging way? So before I start, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Riva and I'm a solutions architect in OutSystems. And so as we start with today's topic, I'd like to ask the question, why? Why does it even matter? And so, to answer that question very quickly, nowadays, with the fast demands of innovation, our main business driver is customer engagement. Delivering the best user experience means driving the profits up and operational costs down. People are spoiled with efficiency. We want things fast, we want things convenient, we want our apps to improve our entire transaction experience. It means that users expect to interact with your application in the simplest way possible. The less learning curve, the better. But it also means that we need to provide the best user experience across different channels in a web browser, in a mobile app, or even without having to install an app in my mobile device, simply by using my mobile browser, but still having a great native experience. But what does this mean for IT and for us who are driving technology? There is a challenge. The challenge is that business always demands innovation to happen now. And so there's so little time. And there's so much skill set that we need as the IT needs to learn. So in this case, how do we build beautiful applications? How do we integrate with chatbots? And many more, such as creating native capabilities, having AI, having offline experiences, and so on and so forth. And so that's where OutSystems comes in. OutSystems simplifies the entire development process. So you could build simple to highly complex enterprise-grade applications and do it visually in an easy-to-learn designer. We're disrupting how applications are made with a powerful visual designer that empowers you to build future-proof, innovative applications. In today's topic, we're going to talk about innovation with chatbots running on a mobile or progressive web apps. And as you would see later on, the entire process is simplified. The question would no longer be about how do I do it, but it would be about what do we build next. And so we would be developing our applications that is iOS and Android friendly in a very visual way. And when we deploy, this is how it would look like in OutSystems. OutSystems can generate installers for iOS and Android, wherein I could still upload this in the App Store so that my B2C users could download from the App Store. Or I could also distribute this as a progressive web app through a hyperlink or a QR code without even going through the App Store. So what this means is that with this QR code or a hyperlink that you could send out to your users could already access your application and have a native capability, meaning that we remove the friction of having to install an application for users who'd rather not install an app, but still maximize the native mobile capabilities such as camera, location, QR code, offline capabilities, push notifications, and so on and so forth. And that's essentially why progressive web apps are getting more and more popular. Now, on top of that, aside from running this application on my browser, a user could still choose to install that application on their device if they want to. So they're given that choice. And so let's also talk about chatbots. One way to interact and transact with our customers in a very natural way is to have a conversation. But if we have repetitive and predictable conversations, what if we automate and ask a robot to do those transactions for us? That's where chatbots come in. And so OutSystems has a direct integration with AWS chatbot service called Lex, where OutSystems can generate the application with all the business logic, and Lex is behind the scene giving the intelligent natural language interaction. And so let's see how it works. I would first like to show you a demonstration of a sample application that I already built and how it looks like in a PWA application and how it could interact with a B2C user. And later on, I'm going to show you how to build an application from scratch almost and build your chatbot from scratch. And so let's get to it. So first and foremost, I'd like to show you an example of an application. This is OutSystems Service Studio. This is where the magic happens for a developer, and this is where we build our applications visually. And so I'm not going to deep dive on how to build applications now, but what I'm going to show you is that this application has a screen wherein I could have my conversations with my chatbot, and this interacts with Amazon Lex. Now, let me show you what that app is about. And so before that, I'm going to scan this progressive web app QR code on my screen, and I'm also projecting my phone. And so let me put this aside and trigger my camera to scan this QR code. And so again, as a user, I don't need to have this application installed in my device. I could simply run it given a URL that I already have. And so from here, I could sign in to my application. And by the way, this is an example of a B2C app with fancy charts and graphs and animations, as what you could see, all running in my progressive web app. And this is also a sample of a use case for a power company wherein I could check my utilities and my bills. So from here, what I could do is I could browse the application. I could pay my bills if I want to. I could also control my IoT devices. But unfortunately, our topic today is not about IoT. So I'm going to skip that part for now. What I want to do is I want to ask the support about something, such as how do I pay my power utility bills, or how much amount of bills do I have due? So from here, I could click ask for help, and I could start talking to my bot. So from here, I could already say, when is my bill due? And as I ask that, my chatbot already processes the information that I need to know today. Aside from that, my chatbot is smart enough to ask me if I want to know how much is my bill amount. So it's already trying to guess what do I want to know next. And it also makes it easy for me to interact. Instead of having to type in my questions, I could simply interact by clicking these buttons. Now, this is a great way to interact in a very conversational manner to my system and giving me the information that I need without having to figure out where do I click to see what information. And so that's a very quick demonstration of a powered utility application for a B2C user interacting with a chatbot. Okay, so let me now jump to how do we build this type of technology. And so with this, I first want to talk about some examples of a human interaction. So this is a civilized interaction in the internet between a human being and Amazon Lex, the chatty robot. So first, the human being says, I want to do something, such as I want to buy flowers. And in Lex terminology, that is considered as an utterance or simply a phrase that invokes an intention for your user. And later on, you're going to understand more why we're talking about these terminologies. And so our chatbot would then respond with a prompt. So with this prompt, the intention of it is that we're trying to get more information from a user. And we're asking them to input a type of data, which is the type of flowers. So my user could then respond with my input parameter, which we call slots. So this is now going back to Lex and keying in or or detecting that my flower type input parameter is roses as entered by my user. And that's what we considered a slot. After that, that's where we would now want to do our fulfillment. A fulfillment means this is essentially the activity that we want to do to fulfill a specific request on the backend system. In this case, what I want to do is I want to be able to save my data into an OutSystems database, which is the type of order that my customer wants to do. Okay, so that's the fulfillment that I want to do. And so to do that, I would create a REST API on OutSystems that simply saves my order onto my OutSystems database. And to trigger that API, I also want to call a Lambda function from AWS to trigger that API from my chatbots. Now, don't be confused. I'm going to show you how it would look like in the actual implementation.
So let's get to the juicy part. Let's start building. And so the first thing that we want to do when we build our chatbot is to configure that chatbot. And this happens in AWS console. And let me now navigate into my AWS console, which is here, where you could do a lot of AWS services, such as setting up your Lambda, your infrastructure, or in this case, we're going to Amazon Lex. This is how we could, these are different options in Amazon Lex. The first thing we want to do is we want to create a new bot for our new application. You could either create from scratch or you could create from a sample. In this case, let's try to create from a sample template that AWS already provides. And since I like flowers, I'm going to choose order flowers. And this is already explaining to you the different structures that your chatbot has, which we have spoke about earlier. So let's choose a different languages and inputs that this is asking for. And let's create our chatbot. The first thing that it's asking for is the utterances. So if you remember what an utterance is, these are essentially the phrases that the end user is typing within our chats that invokes the intent of ordering the flowers. So you could add more and more utterances here for you to be able to know what does the user want to do. So you could even just simply say flowers if you want it to be dummy proof, or you could say buy flowers. Okay. Aside from this, at the bottom, it's also asking for slots. Slots, again, are the data that we want the users to input. So in this case, we want them to input the type of flower that they want to buy. When do they want to pick up the flower? And what time do they want to pick up the flower? So again, these are your input parameters. And how do we retrieve those input parameters in a natural language way? That is the prompt, and that is essentially the text that that the chatbot would respond with. So in this case, our chatbot is already asking some questions. What type of flowers would you like? And this would be saved into our flower type. What day do you want the flower type to be picked up? And so that would save into our pickup date. And at what time do you want the flower type to be picked up? And that would be our pickup time. So you could see that you could add more and more slots here if you want to. I'm going to stick with what we have currently. The next thing that it's going to ask for is the fulfillment. Oh, no, it's a confirmation prompt. So the confirmation prompt is simply asking you to confirm, or asking the users to confirm if they would like to proceed before doing the fulfillment. So in our case, the confirmation question from our bot to the user would be, okay, your flower type will be picked up at what time, on what date? Does this sound okay? And if the user says yes, then we will proceed with fulfilling whatever function that we have to do. Otherwise, if they say no, then this will be the response. Now for the fulfillment. This is what we want the bot to do after we complete that conversation. So either we call a Lambda function, which is a Python script, or for now, let's stick with something simple first. Let's do nothing for now. Okay, so we're simply going to return the parameters to the client as a response from the bot. After doing everything, the next thing we want to do is we want to build our changes. After building that change, we could already do an express testing. Cool. So we could now chat with our bot. So let's say I would say I want flowers. Remember, these were the prompts that were asking for the input parameter. So this is the flower type. And from the bottom, you could already see in real time what are the slots and what are the values of those slots as we proceed with our conversation. So let's say I want to say sunflowers. And you could see that the sunflowers is already updated under our flower type. What day? And here I could already say, let's say next month. Okay. So the thing about the Amazon Lex chatbot has natural language processing. So if I say next month, next week, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, it's going to be able to receive that and translate that to an actual value. In this case, my pickup date was set to June 30. And I could essentially say that I wanted to be picked up at noontime. Okay. This is just testing how powerful the NLP is. So it already detected that the pickup time is 12 p.m. And it's now asking me my confirmation. So that's a confirmation prompt. And here I could say yes. This time we don't have a fulfillment yet. And so it's just returning to me the response parameters that we just inputted.
So going back to where we were, first, we're done with creating the chatbots. Second, we want to build and configure our OutSystems application to connect to that chatbot. So OutSystems has a out-of-the-box connection to AWS Lex chatbots on top of many other integrations and connectors that we already have. So you could go to outsystems.com/forge, search for AWS Lex, and this is already a built-in connector that you could already use, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And so from here, what I did was I already installed this connector to my development environment, and I'm going to use this connector using drag and drop. So let's go to our application. What I have in my application is a simple page. So I created already a simple page wherein I have a list, as what you could see here. So this is a list that simply has a list of chat messages UI blocks. So if you're not familiar with this in OutSystems, you could actually search for pre-created UI templates that we have out of the box. One of that is a chat message, and this is simply showing my chat message in a list form. Okay. Now I'm not populating from a chatbot yet. This is simply purely user interface. And at the bottom, I also have a text box with a message icon. Now, when I click send message, what would happen is that this would be what my code looks like on the back end. So in my back end code, I would have a simple verification that I have an input. So this has an input validation. And after that, we will assign my input to my variable called text message. Okay. And I would add that as into my list of chat messages. And this is simply a list of chat messages that is populating the list that we have here in my chat page. So again, this chat page is populating from this list of chat messages. Now going back into here, When a user enters their message, such as "I want some flowers," we are simply adding that text into our chat message in that list. And what we want to do next is we want to call now Amazon Lex chatbots. So we want to send this to our chatbots. Now, before everything, we would first want to connect our environment into that specific account that we have with AWS Console. So what I have here is under my data tab, I created some site properties to merge, to basically keep track of my bot alias, my bot name, and also an optional bot name to display. So this should be, the bot name and the bot alias should be the same name as the chatbot that we just created. But aside from that, we also have an AWS Chatbot Connector that we already have built in within OutSystems. This AWS Chatbot Connector has to be pre-configured in our service center as well. So in our Chatbot Connector, what we would have in our service center would be this, site properties for us to change. So you could see the different site properties I have here, and I have masked because this is very sensitive. Of course, I don't want to share that with everyone. Wherein I could input my access key and my secret key and my region also, so that my environment could interact with my AWS account. Now, aside from that, in Service Center, I could also change my site properties for the chatbot application that we created just now. And these are the same site properties that I showed you in my development environment. And I have changed that already to be the same name as the chatbot that we just created in Amazon Lex. So what we have here is the out-of-the-box chatbot connector, wherein I could simply download this from the Forge, and I could already trigger my chatbots after I configure all of my keys and my chatbot name. So I could simply drag and drop this onto my screen and fill in my bot name, my bot alias, my message, and my user ID. So I'm just going to quickly fill up those information. And as I mentioned before, this name and alias, we're going to populate from our site properties. So I'm just doing that very quickly. And of course, we don't want to hard code any of these information, just so it's easy to change later on. For the message, we're going to show the same message. We're going to, send the message that our user has typed from the text message input parameter. And I'm simply going to put in the user ID here. Okay, so that's as simple as that for triggering our chatbots. What I have here is I also want to detect if there was an error in my chatbot. So I'm going to change this to check if my simple message was successful or if there was an error. So I simply want to check if this one is not null. Okay. And if it's not null, meaning there's an error, then I want to show that the error message in my notification. So from here, I could also select the chatbot's error message and just show that as a notification to my user. So that's the sad path. But the happy path is that if everything is good and my chatbot has responded successfully, then we're going to add that bot message into our list of chats on the screen. So similar to how we added the message from our user, we now want to send the message or append the message that came from our chatbot. So from here, I'm going to select the chatbot response message, which is essentially the prompts and the fulfillment confirmation that the chatbot would respond with. And so when everything is done, I'm gonna start building. Okay. So what this is doing now is it's creating my PWA application. And if I'm also generating the iOS and Android installers, it's gonna generate those automatically for me. So now that we have our chatbots, I can show you first what it looks like. So let's see. I want flowers. And you could see that the chatbot is responding the same response that we were getting earlier today. Okay, so what type of flowers would you like? Lilies. Today at 10 p.m. Okay, so now we're not doing anything after the fulfillment of my entire conversation. So after I confirm this is simply gonna tell me nothing because we're not doing anything yet. So the next step that we want to do here is to build our REST APIs for our fulfillment. So to fulfill this order, we first want to create a database table to save our flower orders and create a REST API to expose a save order method so that our chatbot could call that method. So let's go back to our designer. So going back here, I'm now going to create a new database table, which I will call flower orders. Okay. For my flower orders, I'm going to have a few attributes, which is my flower type, my pickup date, and if you notice, as I put date, OutSystems automatically detects my data type. I don't even have to change anything. And I could also say pickup time, and my data type is set to time already.
So you've seen how we could easily create database tables, but how can we easily create REST APIs visually? Here in OutSystems under the Logic tab, we have a REST API option where we could expose and consume APIs. In this case, we want to expose an API where our Lambda function from AWS Cloud could call OutSystems with the input parameters from the data that we got from the chatbot and save that into the OutSystems database that we just created. So from here, I'm going to create a new REST API method. So my API library is called flowers. And with that, I will create a new method called post order. This new method is saving data. So we're going to change this method type to a post. And let me double click that to now show you how the logic looks like. So right now we don't have anything yet. The first and foremost thing that we're going to do is get our input parameters. So let's define our input parameters first. So these are essentially the things that we need the Lambda function to get from the chatbot and save into the database. So if you guess it right, that would be the flower type, the pickup date, and again, the data type for all of these that I'm typing in are intelligently guessed by OutSystems already. So if I say pickup time, my data type is time. And for all of these input parameters, by default, they're set to be received in the URL as a query string together with the body of your URL. But I'm going to change this to be received from the header instead. So I'm changing all of that to receive from the header. Aside from that, I also need another variable just to store all of these into an object. So I'm going to name this as flower order, the same name as my database, because when I do that, OutSystems guesses already my data type to be the same as my database, and therefore giving me the same structure as my database. So now that we have a variable here, I could drag and drop that onto my designer, wherein it would create an assign function for me to assign the value of each of these attributes for my new database entry. And as what you could see here, it's already guessing what do I want to assign as my value under these suggestions. So that's our version of IntelliSense in a very visual way. Um, the next thing we want to do is we already have our input parameters, our input from the chatbot. Now that we have that, we want to save it into this database that we just created. So from here, we could drag and drop this CRUD method that OutSystems created for us, which is the create or update flower orders. And my input would be the flower order variable that we just created. So with that, we already have our REST API ready for consumption. I'm clicking the one-click publish, and it's already publishing for me the API. And if I go back here after publishing, I could already click Open Documentation, where OutSystems created for me a documentation file for me to see how does my REST API look like. So I could copy and paste this. And if you remember, we created our input parameters, which we will receive within our header.
After creating that REST API, we want to create a new page just to show what are the orders that I have today. Okay, so let me just create a new page very quickly by simply dragging and dropping this flower orders database table onto my UI catalog. And OutSystems has accelerators to create my listing screen and my details screen for me, populating from this database table. So now that I have that, I already have pre-created or accelerated the creation of my orders. And I could also create, and I could also see the detail pages for each of those orders. Okay. Now, with that, I would now like to build my application. And again, just a recap, we just created an API. So the next step that we want to do now is we would now like to trigger our fulfillment. So with that, we need to have a way for the chatbot to trigger that fulfillment, which is a REST API, and we will do that using Lambda functions. So I'm now gonna go to my AWS console again, and within my AWS console, I could have access to Lambda. And from here, I have different functions that I could create. So you could create a new function here if you want, use a blueprint. What I did just now was I created a blueprint using the Lex flower orders, Lex order flowers Python blueprint, so that I don't have to create everything from scratch. Now I happen to have a function that I already have here, in which I used the pre-built function created by Lambda for me, but I added this specific code that I needed to call my API. So with this, I simply called the API that we just created from the OutSystems console with our input parameters, which is the flower type, the pickup date, and the pickup time. And with this, by calling this API, this would then trigger my creation to my OutSystems database for my flower order. So let's see how it looks like. But before that, of course, we have to link this up back to our Amazon Lex. So we could now choose our Lambda function from here, select the flowers code hook that we just created, build our application, and publish our application. And as we publish, we're going to use the same beta alias that we selected just now. So after publishing our application, we could now test our application. So from here, I could already test my application, whether in my phone or in my browser. So let's test in our browser, wherein I could also scan that PWA in my phone if I want to. Let's do our order. So I want to order some flowers. By the way, I first want to show you that our flower order list is empty for now because we haven't created anything yet using our Lambda function calling our REST API. So I want to order some flowers. This time I want to order some lilies by tomorrow at 10 p.m. And that's the confirmation. After we click yes, this should now call my Lambda function that calls my REST API that creates my database entry in my flower order. So when I click this, there you go, we have lilies. So that essentially shows a creation of a new chatbot that integrates with my OutSystems PWA application. That also showcases how we could create scripts and create REST APIs and trigger those APIs from our chatbots. So with this, I would like to end with a thought or with a challenge for you, which is for any type of application that you may want to build, I would like to challenge you to try to build it on OutSystems. And we do have a lot of connectors already in place for a lot of AWS functions in outsystems.com/forge that you could use for free. So I would like to invite you as well for the next session, which is how Lender overcame development bottlenecks with OutSystems. So stay tuned for the next session. And with that, let me close with showing you a URL to the free edition of OutSystems. And with this free edition, you could create your own applications. You could create your own integrations to AWS services if you want, or just create your own fun applications, whether it's a web app or a mobile application. And so I'll see you around. Bye.